I have some advice for if we have any younger people in the audience today, I have some advice too. The thing that will carry you further in life, in music or any career, is be nice to everybody. Now, I know that sounds very simple and straightforward, but I mean, if somebody is from a different country, be nice to them. If somebody speaks a different language, be nice to them. Somebody's a different religion from you, be nice to them. Somebody has a different color skin than you, be nice to them. You never know who's going to open a door for you in your life. And you can't diss anybody. You got to be nice to everybody.
Warning. This episode contains adult language and adult humor.
Since when have trumpet players ever been considered adults?
If you are easily offended by these types of conversations, consider switching to the oboe. Welcome to the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. My guest for this episode is Tom Bones Malone. Tom is a legend in the music business. Since his early days at North Texas, Tom has made a name for himself as a talented multi-instrumentalist, arranger, and producer. He's been a late-night TV staple with his decade-long runs on both Saturday Night Live and The Late Show with David Letterman. And he's lent his talents to everyone from Aretha to Zappa. And man, does he have some great stories to tell. So, pour yourself a big glass, pull up a chair, and let the hang begin. Welcome to this episode of the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast, and I am joined this week by the legendary Tom Bones Malone. Tom, I am so honored to be with you today. A huge fan of you over the decades. So thanks for being with me.
I'm very honored that you asked me to be on your show.
Oh man, the people that I hold in high esteem hold you in high esteem. So therefore, even though we've never met before today, I do feel like I know you because, I've talked to so many people and I've listened to your music over the years. And I'm really interested in this. And for those of you who don't know who Tom is and you're going, why do you have a guy named Bones on the broadcast? He's not a trumpet player. Yes, he is, besides playing trombone and saxophone and flute. And he's a heck of a trumpet player. And great arranger, and obviously, besides being a player, as an arranger and performer, has worked with some of the greatest trumpet players of our time. So I'm really interested in getting into some of the stuff. So Tom, welcome, and I just want to start at the beginning because you went to college and you were also a psychology major. You minored in music, is that correct?
I started off in music at University of Southern Mississippi, and as a music major. Now, I had started playing professionally when I was 14 on the saxophone, and some kids, high school kids, wanted to start a rock and roll band, and I got out my trombone and I got out my trumpet, and they said, and I said, "What's up?" And they said, "You don't have trombones and rock and roll bands." This is 1961.
Right.
So I said, well, what am I supposed to play? I want to be in the band. I want to hang with the guys. I want to meet girls. So they said, you got to play saxophone. So my friend, these guys were setting up in my living room, and we're going to start a band. My best friend in high school was there. He had an alto and a tenor, so he started showing me how to play tenor right there, and I started working on that. But that day, I said to the guys, I says, why isn't the trombone a rock and roll instrument? And they said they didn't know. But ever since then, I thought that it should be. And but I also played trumpet, and my first big time gig actually was playing lead trumpet with Brenda Lee in Jackson, Mississippi.
Oh,
I was the only guy that could hit the high note that's in the book. So I hitchhiked. I didn't have a car. I hitchhiked 85 miles up to Jackson, Mississippi, 6 nights in a row, and went to college during the day.
Okay.
At the time, I was going to college at University of Southern Mississippi. I had started arranging music when I was 13. So when I got to college at University of Southern Mississippi, Hattiesburg, I took a course called Music Theory 101. And so I answered all the questions for a couple of weeks, and then the teacher took me out in the hall, and he says, "You don't have to come to class anymore. You get an A."
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and then he taught me how to copy music professionally on Oslid reproduction paper with an ink pen, and he hired me to copy his symphony. He had written he was working on his PhD at Indiana University in composition. So I made a little money actually copying music for him, and it was a good skill to have.
Right.
If you're breaking into a town, it's nice to have some backup skills. So that really helped me out a lot. So I think I played the first year in college. I think I played second alto in the stage band, and then the second year I played lead trombone, and I wrote some arrangements. And we went to the Mobile Jazz Festival in the spring of 1967. So meanwhile, after that theory class thing that happened, I changed my major to psychology. So I transferred to North Texas State after hearing the North Texas band at the Mobile Jazz Festival, spring of '67.
Right.
I played some solos, and we played some of my arrangements. The North Texas band was there with Lou Marini, and they played some of his charts, and he played some solos. And so we met, and Lou says, you should really transfer to North Texas State next year. So I did. I started in the fall of '67, my junior year. I transferred into North Texas State. And it was a very challenging situation, to say the least.
Wow.
The lead trumpet player had just gotten off the road with Stan Kenton, as well as the drummer. The trumpet player was Jay Saunders, legendary teacher.
Yeah.
He played on played lead on 8 Kenton albums. Let's see. Ed Sof, the drummer, he'd also just gotten off the road with Stan Kenton's band.
Right.
And so these are the guys I'm playing with every day.
Oh my!
And they whipped us into shape. They would say, "Look, you should play this more like this." And so it was a good learning experience for me. And Lou Marini was in the band, Dr. Tom Boris, Gary Grant, Sal Marquez, Bruce Fowler, Jimmy Clark. It was just
holy cow!
Oh my God, yeah. And the second year I was there, Dean Parks was lead alto, clarinet, and flute, who became a studio guitar player in Los Angeles.
I didn't know that he was a sax player.
Yeah. Oh, he was really good too.
Yeah.
He taught me how to play electric bass, actually. David Hungate was jazz trombone in the 2 O'Clock band. He moved to LA and became the bass player with Toto.
Right.
Yeah. So there was all kinds of guys like that at the school. So it was really, even though I was majoring in psychology, all I did was hang out with musicians and play gigs to send myself to school. I didn't have any money. So great situation there. Oh my God.
Well,
yeah. But I learned so much. Most of my playing knowledge was like hanging out with people and talking about playing and actually sitting next to somebody and listening to them play. That's where I really learned about stuff.
Yeah.
How to play any instrument.
Yeah.
So I remember one time in a rehearsal, Jay Saunders, he stops the band and he says, Tom, he says, you should play that more like Jim Trimble on Buddy Rich album. And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I never heard the album. I don't know who he is, So he says, man, look, why don't you come over to my place and we'll dig some sides tonight. And so from then on, every night, Gary Grant and I would go over to Jay Saunders' house and listen to music.
Oh,
I never could afford to buy albums. Anyway, he had this great selection. He had every great jazz, big band, great jazz like Miles Davis, Freddie Hubbard, Dizzy Gillespie. So we'd go over there and hang out and listen, and I just learned so much about big band playing, different styles of playing. There's a certain Kenton vibrato that you use. There's a certain you should be able to tell whether the band is West Coast or East Coast by the time feel, like all kinds of stuff like that. I learned so much from Jay Saunders. He was like my music teacher, and I can't thank him enough. We're still friends. I think he retired from North Texas, but amazing guy on many levels.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that, I think, more than anything else is something that's been missing, and obviously it's been missing during this COVID era. But that ability to just be immersed in the culture of music and being around greats, and there's always that kind of level of everyone's trying to push each other a little bit further to help them along, and that being in that level of community where you've got someone like a Jay Saunders who's really trying to help you to develop as a player, and Gary and everybody else, that's phenomenal. And
Okay.
yeah.
Gary Grant, by the way, you know who Gary Grant is?
Oh,
right?
yeah, I know
Yeah,
Gary.
Gary, he was lead trumpet with the Jerry Hay Horns for 3,500 records. And anyway, he was my roommate in college, and I learned a lot about playing the trumpet from him too, because he practiced all the time.
Yeah.
Shortly after I had become a contractor around Hattiesburg, Mississippi, when I was at Southern Miss. I started contracting for Warren Covington and the Tommy Dorsey band. So I called Warren when I got to North Texas, and I said, "Warren, I'm in Denton now." He said, "Great, you'll be my contractor." And he gave my name to all kinds of other artists. There was a lot of big band ghost bands out there at the time.
Right.
Warren had the Tommy Dorsey Ghost Band. Tex Beneke had the Glenn Miller Ghost Band. So he started giving my name out to people in New York that contracted gigs like that. One-nighters. You'd show up. I'd get a band from North Texas. We'd drive 350 miles to Houston, do a one-nighter, 4-hour gig, no rehearsal.
Yeah.
And this is the way I put myself through college. I was contracting, and there were guys in North Texas that could sight read music, play it right the first time.
Right.
So and then somebody gave my name to some people in Detroit, and next thing I know, they called me up and said, "We need 11 horn players to do a 3-day tour. It's going to be Dallas, Shreveport, and Houston. We're gonna bring a rhythm section from Detroit, and it's Martha and the Vandellas, the Supremes, and the Temptations."
Oh, man.
Yeah, 1969. This was Cloud 9 was their hit single.
Right.
This was before it was Diana Ross and the Supremes,
Right.
just the Supremes.
The Supremes, right.
Later in my career, I played on a lot of her solo albums that were recorded in New York. But that little mini tour blew my mind. It just I couldn't believe how great that the rhythm section they brought from Detroit was ridiculous.
Oh,
so
yeah.
that led to another gig with Marvin Gaye, a few months later, and that I contracted 11 horns to play with Little Stevie Wonder when he was 16. This is at Albuquerque and El Paso. Yeah, and I actually played trumpet on the gig. I was contracting, so I would play, bass trombone, trumpet, bari sax. It didn't matter if I could get a good trombone player. I'd play trumpet. It didn't matter. So I was actually a trumpet player with Little Stevie Wonder, and he took me in as a friend. He was like, "Wow," he says, "Man," he says. At the time, he was just recording songs that were written by the Motown staff writers in Detroit. So he says, "I'm writing my own songs, man. You want to check it out?" And he had a sophisticated portable cassette machine and some good headphones. So I put them on it. And the stuff was so great. And I said, "Who played on this?" He says, "I played everything."
Yeah, Stevie.
Bass, drums, guitar, organ, piano, and all vocals.
Yeah.
And so that reinforced me a bit. Well, if he can do it, I can do it. Why can't I can play all the instruments?
Yeah.
So I got to play with Stevie many times in my career, on Saturday Night Live, on Letterman, TV special on the White House lawn one time, a very special Christmas 5, and we did Stevie's This Christmas with Macy Gray. We're on the set, and the director says, "We're going to take a little break to change the lighting setup. Band, don't leave. Just stay in place." So Stevie starts playing giant steps on the keyboard. Da 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 da, and then he starts blowing on it, and he's all over the song. And director says, "Cut. Okay, let's go back to work." But everybody thinks of Stevie Wonder's being like he's just a R&B guy. No, he can play anything. He's a super genius. Yeah. And Stevie always remembers me when I run into him down the road. This is like more than 50 years later. Last time I saw him was on the Letterman show, 2014, 2015. We did "I Wish." I wrote a chart for him and we backed him up, and I ran into him in the elevator, and I said, Stevie, it's Tom, the trumpet player from Albuquerque. And he says, it's nice to see you.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, man. Right there, that story just kind of goes to show that you never know what one thing will lead to. And I've had this conversation recently with a number of people, both in the music world and in the business world. Like, you never know what you're doing right now, how that's going to affect your future. And so when you come into any situation, you always need to be your best and do your best, because even if it's not your ideal situation, that could be the stepping stone to the gig that you always dreamed of getting. So don't blow anything off. And that's just, I think in your career, I mean, as you look at, just that little story, and see how some of this has come full circle, and how those roots supported you and created this very, very strong career for you, and given you the ability to touch musically, to touch so many people across generations and across genres. And it all comes back to that first kind of, with Lou asking you to come to North Texas State, and all those relationships that just start to blow up out of there.
Changed the rest of my life, big time, transferring to North Texas, because the people I met there, I keep running into, during the rest of my life. And it just opens, if you're going to be a professional musician, you don't want to turn down gigs. Yep. Well, I don't know how to play Latin music, so I guess I can't do this one. Oh, I don't know how to play Jewish music, so I guess I can't do this gig. No, you want to be able to play, classic. You want to be able to play anything. I played with symphony orchestras. I played Latin. I played on all the Fania records, salsa records in New York, 1974, 75, 76. Barry Rogers was the Latin trombone player. He was actually the first Latin trombone player in New York. And he brought me into Fania Records, and he said, look, he says, guys, I'm getting some better work now, so you should hire this guy to be your trombone player. And he showed me everything there was to know about, playing Latin music. I had actually started playing with Ismael Rivera in New York.
Yeah.
Just somebody asked me to sub on trumpet one night, and boom. And now I'm playing music where the bass does not play one.
Yeah.
You got to so, and I just jumped in there and I learned how to play that style of music. And I made my living for a few years doing that sort of thing, at least a year and a half, playing in casinos. I went to the International Salsa Festival with Ismael Rivera in 1975, Caracas, Venezuela. Oh. We won third place. Yeah.
Really?
No, I would play trumpet or trombone, whatever he needed. I didn't care. But he was the first salsa singer. The first salsa band was Cortijo y su Combo. Cortijo was a Cuban conga player who moved to Puerto Rico, and he started this band. And my God, the whole thing it was really booming in New York in the 70s, the whole salsa music scene.
Yeah. Well, that's, and there's there's another great, there's so many lessons that I've already gotten out of this, and I know there's going to be more to come, but that one, it's the willingness to play whatever musically, but also that the attitude that you have of, hey, you need me to play trumpet, you need me to play trombone, you need to play saxophone, you need me to write a chart, you need, what do you need? As opposed to, I only do this, or I only want to do this. It sounds to me like what you want to do is you want to play music. You want to enjoy yourself in the expression of that art form, and how that manifests itself is less important than the fact that you get to do something that you love.
My attitude is that I can do anything. That's it. That's my attitude. Boom.
That's a great attitude to have. And if you don't have it, you'll never be able to do it. If
you don't have that, if you think you're going to hit the note, you will hit it. If you have some doubt, well, gee, I don't know if I can hit that note. You're gonna miss it. You're gonna clam it up. And so that my attitude is, I'm going to hit the note. Well, let's see. I took Chuck Winfield's place with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, 1973, playing trumpet, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and got to play with Lou Soloff, who was a great influence on me. Oh my God. I remember the first gig I did with him, it was pretty brutal. And towards the end of the gig, I was like, oh man, I gotta really start breathing here. And Lou, he would get stronger as the gig went on. He would just like hit higher notes, and he got more ridiculous as time went on. So I learned an awful lot from him. Another trumpet gig I had was the original horn section on the CBS orchestra, Late Show with David Letterman. It was just two horns. It was me on trumpet and Bruce Kapler on tenor sax. And suddenly there's an F sharp in the song, and then it ends on a high F. And I did my lip slurs and stuff, and got a special mouthpiece, and bang, my attitude was that I can do this. Yeah. And Paul wanted me in the band too. We were old friends already from many things, many events. So that was a great experience. After 3 or 4 years, Paul hired a full-time trumpet player named Al Ches. So then I went more to playing trombone, bari sax, tenor sax, second trumpet, flute, piccolo, whatever they wanted.
Right. Yeah. Well, man, again, I keep getting blown away by these things, because people look at your career and they might go, well, it's kind of a storybook career. You've been in these kind of all these high profile gigs. But I'm a firm believer that, the idea of luck is when preparation meets opportunity, and, you were prepared, and so when an opportunity came up, you were prepared not only in your technical skills, but you were prepared with the attitude that you needed to have to go into those gigs, which is, if you have to learn something new, you'll learn something new. And that you can learn it because, you've learned so much in the past. So you know what it takes to learn something new and to attain a new level of skill. And I think sometimes we get, especially, I hate to say the young generation since, I'm feeling like the old man sometimes. But
I'm 7. I'm going to be 74 next month.
Yeah, and that you don't look a day over. I won't even say that you look younger than me. So
I feel like I'm 18.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And the old saying that you're as young as you feel. I think you're as young as you think. And as long as you keep your mind young, you will be young.
I have some advice for if we have any younger people in the audience today. I have some advice too. The thing that will carry you further in life, in music or any career, is be nice to everybody. Now, I know that sounds very simple and straightforward, but I mean, if somebody is from a different country, be nice to them. If somebody speaks a different language, be nice to them. Somebody's a different religion from you, be nice to them. Somebody has a different color of skin than you, be nice to them. You never know who's going to open a door for you in your life. And you can't diss anybody. You got to be nice to everybody. Yeah. And also, professional musician, like let's say you finish college and you decide you're going to move to town to be a professional musician. You're going to move to New York. You're going to move to Los Angeles. You're going to move to Nashville. First of all, somebody already has all the gigs, right? So the only way you're going to get involved in the scene is somebody that already has the gigs is going to have to hear you play and think that they can send you into sub form, and that's the way you can break in. So, and being nice to everybody goes a long way. Let's say contractor is looking for a trumpet player, and he can either hire you or this other new kid that came to town, and you both play about the same level. Who's he going to hire? He's going to hire the nicest guy. He's going to hire the guy that gets along with everybody. I've seen a lot of trumpet players burn bridges. They come in and they get on the gig and they say, "Oh, I can play better than that lead player. I should be playing a lead." See, you can't diss people. You can't go into a gig and tell the contrary. Look, call me next time instead of the other guy, because word gets out. It's always a small community of people that do all the gigs in whatever town you're in. So You got to be nice to everybody, and you don't diss anybody, especially the guy that sent you in for the gig. You can say to the contractor, look, if Ruby Green is not available, call me. Here's my business card. And a business card is a great thing to have too, because you can't walk into town and brag about yourself. If you have an agent, the agent can brag about you. But if you just, like most musicians don't have an agent, you're just on your own. So you can't walk in and say, hey, I'm Tom Malone, I'm the best, blah, blah, blah. You can't do that. Doesn't work. But you can hand somebody a business card, and that means you mean business. And it's got your phone number and your email address on it, and it has your skills on it. I got some cards that have 14 instruments on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also had one for arranging and copying too, which I got some gigs out of too. So that's my advice for some of you younger people that want to break in.
Well, that's solid advice. And I mean, that opening portion, I think that's advice for everybody, young, old, doesn't matter what you do. Be nice to people. And I was actually just writing content for an upcoming episode of my show that I do on mindfulness. And that was one of the concepts that I was talking about, is the importance of having empathy and compassion, because we've kind of gotten jaded as a society. And I mean, there's that natural portion of our brain that has the negativity bias and other parts of our brain that are designed to protect us in a way. It's like, okay, well, this might be dangerous. It doesn't look like something I know, so it might be dangerous. But the purpose of that was, in our primal states, that was our survival. But now we don't need that, but we still tend to look at things that don't look like us, that don't think like us, that don't talk like us, and view those people as wrong or the enemy, as opposed to, hey, this is just a different facet of life. This is another expression. And instead of thinking, what can I do to protect myself from this person, we should be thinking, what can I do to learn more from this person, to learn about them and to learn about their experiences and to enrich my life through their experiences.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I have learned a lot in my life by travel. My music has taken me all over the world. I've done 12 comprehensive tours of Europe, like every country in Western Europe. 4 tours of Japan, including Miles and Gill, 1983.
Yeah, that had to be one heck of a gig.
Oh my God! Yeah, Cicely Tyson was Miles' girlfriend on the road, and then there was another State Department tour with Gil Evans, where we went to Manila, Hong Kong, Bangkok, and Singapore. Yeah, that was, and going to South America to the Free Jazz Festival with Gil Evans, 1987, 88. Just all kinds of experiences like that, traveling to Canada. I've just been so lucky, because you learn, from other cultures, you learn, how things could be better. Like in Norway, college is free, healthcare is free, pharmaceutical is free. There's different ways of doing things.
Yeah.
So, I didn't go on your show to talk about politics, but I just wanted to say that we can learn a lot. There's more other ways of doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and whether you want to talk about it on a global scale, on the geopolitical scale, or just bringing it back into the world of music, there are lots of ways to do things, and there's lots of people that you can learn from, and it's always having what we always called in martial arts, having the beginner's mind, and just being able to go, well, I know what I know, but I don't know all I could know. So let's experiment and let's play and let's experience. And even sometimes we want to look at, I mean, and certainly someone like you who has so much knowledge and so much experience, you have so much that you can share, but you'd be surprised at what you can learn. I'm not saying you, but what any of us can learn from anyone. There's a 14-year-old out there somewhere who has an insight that I've never had, simply because he's lived a life that I've never lived. And to be able to hear someone explain something in their own unique terms, sometimes it fills in a gap in your understanding. So when you think that you've got all the answers, then you'll never get all the answers. So I think that what you stand for in your approach to music and your communication with others, because I've heard from so many people about the talks that you've done and things like that, and you're just like today, you're just openness to just talk and to share. People who have that side of them generally also have the flip side, which is the I'm willing to listen and to learn. So, I think that that's what really makes a great musician and just a great person in general.
Well, nobody knows everything, and there's so much knowledge out there. The internet has just opened up a huge, giant source of almost any information. You can find out almost anything you want to, like just type it in and hit bang, bang, and there's the answer, and even different points of view on the same subject. I remember when I was in college, if you wanted to get some information for a research paper or something, you had to go to the library and go through this card file, and you got to go up and down these dusty books. And now it's just there was no excuse for ignorance, for sure.
Right.
I mean, we have to be knowledgeable and make decisions based on reality. This COVID pandemic has emphasized knowledge about science, for instance. So once again, I didn't come on your show to talk about politics, but I got my second Pfizer shot a week ago today.
Oh, great.
So there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's the knowledge is one thing. The application of it is the other part. It's like we can have all the knowledge in the world, but if we don't put it to use, it's useless. It's just it's worthless trivia that's kind of floating around in our head. So it's the application. So whether it's the application of science, whether it's the application of theory, and any of those other things, if you know the right thing to do but you don't do it, that's where we start to run into problems. So
even musical knowledge. Like, let's say you're learning to improvise. Well, you need to know. I remember the first time I started improvising, I was 14 and I was on stage and playing saxophone. I've been playing saxophone for about a month, and the leader of the band leans over to me and says, "Play a solo." And I'm like, "What am I supposed to play?" He says, "Anything you want." So I jumped in there, and I soon found out that some notes sounded better than others. Now I'm starting to think, theoretically and mathematically, like what key are we in? What are the notes in the scale? What chord are we on now? So I mean, at this point in my life, it's not that mathematical anymore.
Right.
It was when I first started out. I'm trying to find, I want to play something that makes some sense and goes along with the chords, goes along with the chord structure of the song. But at this point, it's slightly different. The reason we practice, or at least the reason I practice, is because I want the horn to play itself. Now, what's he talking about? That means you're on the bandstand and somebody says, "We're going to play All the Things You Are." Okay, well, so I know the song, and I'm not thinking about what key this is in or that. I just listen to the rhythm section, and I listen to the other side of my brain. Half your brain is intellectual, and the other half is creative. So I turn off the intellectual part, open up the creative side of my brain, and a melody comes out, and the horn will play itself. The horn will play that melody. And it could be the trumpet, it could be the trombone, it could be the saxophone, it could be the flute, it could be the piccolo, it could be the tuba. But you want to practice to the point where the horn plays itself.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's it, and I think so many times we try to make the instrument do things instead of allowing it to do what it does. If we don't get out of our own way, then the music can never come out. And again, I'll put a plug in for myself. I'm actually getting ready to do a presentation for the International Trumpeters Guild.
Excellent. Awesome.
And it's on mindfulness for musicians. and the title is "It's All in Your Head." And that's kind of one of, so this is a teaser for those of you who might be interested in checking out this workshop. And, you've got, definitely you have those two sides of your brain. You have the intellectual, the logical side, you have the creative side, and we need both to work together, but it's understanding when one needs to be dominant. And we get in our own way because we start overthinking things. We start trying to go through these processes instead of just, that's what you do in the practice room. When the practice room, that's when the logic needs to kick in. That's when the analytical mind needs to be in full effect. But once you get on stage, that needs to go away. And you have to allow the creative, because at that point, your brain is actually blocking the music, which is in your heart. The music is your heart and soul. It's not anything that's up here. It's what you're feeling. And that needs to be able to come out of the horn, because the horn's job is just to amplify what you have inside you. It's the amplifier.
Absolutely.
And so
absolutely. I know. And like if you're sight reading music, maybe the intellectual part is dominant because your rhythms are mathematical.
Right.
You're subdividing 4/4 into this and to that and to that. So and then in the next bar you start playing a solo. So you switch sides of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
and once again, like if you're playing a song you don't know, then you're going to have to analyze the chord symbols that are in front of you. So you got both sides of the brain have to be operating. Have to have, I think, equal strength.
Yeah.
Like your ability to turn your creative side loose.
Yeah.
I think is also, it's a skill that we develop as we play music more and more. Like if you say you're going to play a big band concert, so your sight read the chart, that's one level. But after you play several rehearsals, you sort of own the part and you sort of know the part, and you're not really sight reading at that point.
Right.
You digested it, so it's. Balancing the brain. Most people I see in the world, not necessarily music world, but most of the people I see in the outer world are either dominated by one side or the other. But we as musicians have to have both sides. A farmer might not have an intellectual side, but he knows how to do this and to do that. So his creative side is very amplified. And then a pharmacist might have his intellectual side very tweaked. A lawyer might have his intellectual side very tweaked because he has to remember case histories. He has to memorize stuff out of books. So,
right.
But we as musicians need both sides of the brain, and we need to, in some amount of balance.
Yeah, and that's really so interesting in terms of the way we approach practice, and that's one of the things that I hear constantly from people in terms of a criticism of the way that we tend to teach music, and especially in the jazz world, is yes, I think it's very important, and I am by no means a world-class jazz player, but yes, it's important to understand the theory and the history and your patterns and stuff like that, but ultimately, if you're going to be an improviser, it's about creativity. Now, granted, you have to learn the language. You have to have the syntax to have your language be at a higher level. But you need to learn to speak. You need to learn to play. You need to learn to let it out. And one of my favorite improvisers, trumpet players, Tim Hagens. Tim had a really interesting, like a mind-blowing thing that he said about. He said you should basically start every day's practice with like 10 to 20 minutes of free play, just completely free. No tone center, no time, no preconceived idea of what you're doing. He's just like, just let what you feel come out.
No chord structure.
No chord structure, no
whatever
nothing.
You free.
Yeah, and just do it. And he said, and get that creativity going and get it out, because most people can't access their creativity because they don't practice accessing their creativity. So that's why he said something that like when you go, wow, that's really interesting. He said, if I'm listening to you playing a solo, if I walk into a bar and you're playing a solo, and I can whistle or sing or hum what you're going to play next, then you're not really improvising. So if I can predict what you're going to do next, that's really not improvisation. You're doing these predictable patterns. So to be a real improviser, you need to be able to catch people off guard. It needs to be an original statement. It needs to be something from your heart. So I think that sometimes we lose track of that and lose track of the fact that it's an innate skill. We have to practice. Not so much getting out, but we got to practice getting out of the way so that it can come out.
Right. I think of that as letting the creative side of your brain play the horn.
Yeah.
That's what I think Tim Higgins is talking about. I mean, it's another way of interpreting what he says.
Yeah.
And a lot of young players, I go to the JEN convention. I was at the IAJE convention. I've been going to those jazz conventions for 30 years. And, some student will frequently ask me, like, how can I learn to improvise? Well, what I usually tell them to find, let's say it's a trumpet player. Okay. So find a solo by a jazz trumpet player that you really love. Okay. Learn that solo, either learn it by ear or write it down, but learn that solo. And that's a good starting place. Now that's not, and eventually you might, develop your own style. But I think that's a good starting place. It's something that you really like, because if you write it down, you will be able to analyze it. Well, how does this work with the chord? Okay, we're on a dominant chord now. He's playing a +9 and a flat 9. So that gives you tools to put stuff together, put improvisation together, and eventually. You might come up with your own style. I think that's the path that a lot of our friends have gone, that improvise.
Yeah. Well, it's a language, and like with any language, you learn through imitation first. You're copying sounds, you're copying phrases, and then eventually can develop a larger vocabulary, and then you can speak a little more freely. And that's where whenever I have someone says I can't improvise, I'm like, well, you need to rethink that, because you do have the ability to improvise. We're improvising every day, all day. We're just not doing. You may not be doing it on the horn, but you're improvising. So don't say that improvisation is a skill that you don't have, period, within your body. You just haven't learned how to apply it in this particular construct.
Well, no, I've heard that from a lot of people, but I've also seen, like, somebody has an opportunity to improvise and they don't really know how to do it. So now they're on stage and somebody says, play a solo.
Yeah.
So they failed because they don't really know what to do. And then from then on, instead of working on improvisation, they just say, I can't improvise.
Right.
It's just like, it's not something that happens like the first time you try to do it. I mean, you have to have some understanding of what it is. My theory is that anybody can learn to improvise. But with some preparation, I found that the first time people improvise, if they're successful, they will continue to improvise. Now, I do a clinic with fourth graders. I did a clinic with fourth graders in, was it Buffalo or Syracuse? I think it was Buffalo. Anyway, how many of you can improvise? And nobody raised their hands. So how many would like to be able to improvise? And they're like, so I said, well, how many of you can play your B flat scale? That's the C scale for you trumpet players. Mm-hmm. That's the G scale for you alto sax players. So how many of you can play your B flat scale? Everybody raises their hand. I said, well, you can improvise right now. And so I get a rhythm section to play, B flat major, G minor 7, C minor 7, F7, a 1 6 4 5,
right,
1 6 2 5 progression. It's kind of an old doo-wop chord progression, and then I show them, I get the rhythm section and I start showing them how all the notes in the scale fit in there. You can improvise right now. And one at a time, I got 40 fourth graders to come up on the stage and successfully improvise. And those kids will continue to improvise because now they have the confidence that they can do it.
Right.
Now, is that the only song they're going to play for the rest of their life, is improvisers? No. I mean, I start them off with something simple that they can understand, and then maybe all the things you are, or giant steps or something. That's further down the road, but at least you have a basic idea of that the scale fits this chord progression.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the thing, like you're saying, that they have a positive experience. And going back to that, what I was saying about, people, you always have the ability to improvise. It's restructuring your concept of what you're trying to say. It's being clear on your definition, because when people say they can't improvise, they maybe mean they can't improvise to the level of someone like you, or the level of someone like Lou Marini, or anybody like that. It's like, well, I can't do it at that level, so therefore I can't do it. As opposed to, I can do it. It may not sound that great to start out with, but I can do it. And now I know that I have, just like you have the ability to walk or to do any physical activity. When you first start doing it, it's going to stink. It's not going to be very good. But with practice, it improves. But if every skill that we learned in our life, we felt like we had to do it at a high level immediately, then we'd never do anything. We'd never walk. We'd never drive a car. We'd never,
Right.
we'd never do anything.
Well, just like I was saying before, I want the horn to play itself. That's why I practice. Now, you learn to walk at an early age, and you probably stumbled around a little bit, but now when you're walking down the street, your body walks by itself, and you don't think about it. It body walks by itself, and you're thinking about everything except. And like after when you first start driving a car, it's the same thing. It's tough, but after a while, the car drives itself. Your body automatically drives the car, and you're thinking about your girlfriend. You're thinking about the gig. You're thinking about everything except driving the car. And okay, so yes, everybody can improvise. No, like we're carrying on a conversation right now, and we're actually improvising using words.
Right.
You say something, and it engenders an idea in my mind. I say something, and it engenders an idea in your mind. I mean, so improvisation is just using different elements. You're using musical elements instead of verbal elements.
Right.
And that being said, music is invisible. You can watch somebody play an instrument, but the music itself is invisible. And magician and musician are almost the same word.
I like that.
And also color, music harmony and color harmony are all the same when you break it down into physical elements, frequency relationships. Like, an octave higher is double the frequency. C32, low C32, an octave higher is C64. An octave higher is middle C, 128 cycles per second. You can hear 8 or 10 octaves depending on your ear. You can only see one octave, but the frequency relationships of the color harmony and music harmony are exactly the same. For instance, visualize red, yellow, and blue. Okay. Now these colors harmonize, and they have a sort of a happy feeling about them too. That's equivalent to C, E, and G. That's like a major triad. Okay, now envision these colors: orange, green, purple. Now these colors harmonize, but it's a whole different emotional feeling. And that's D, F, and A. That's a D minor chord. So right there, music harmony and color harmony, art and music are all the same now.
Wow. I never knew that. That's great. That's a great tip. I'll have to make sure I put that as a highlight for this episode. So, wow, that's great. I want to ask you about a couple of things. In terms of like the psychology of playing, so many people have stage fright, and that's actually one of the things that got me like serious into martial arts, was that I was in with a lot of stage fright as a musician. It's like I could play in a section, don't put me out front. But I did learn a way to deal with that. But I know there are a lot of people that still to this day have problems with dealing with, okay, oh my God, I've got, 100 people in this audience, or I've got, I'm playing in a stadium full of 1,000 people. And in your case, you've played with the knowledge that there are millions of people that are, watching your performance at any given time. Has that ever crossed your mind, the magnitude of your audience, and has it affected you? And if so, how do you manage that and allow it to, or not allow it to get in the way of your music?
Well, one of the things about stage fright is it's something that the first time I was on stage, I remember I think I was in a school band or something, and I had a little bit of anxiety, because the parents and relatives and I think all the other parents and there's all these 800 people in the audience watching the concert. So, the great thing about music education is that the more you perform in front of people, the less anxiety you experience. That's what I like about school bands, because you're marching in front of a big audience at the football game. You're playing a concert. You're playing. I was playing in clubs from age 14, and just the more you do it, the less anxiety you have. I remember we played the closing ceremonies in Atlanta at the Olympics. It was live TV for 100 million people all over the world, and there were 87,000 people in the arena. Yeah. So so that, I think that's the biggest audience that I ever played for. But I remember the very first Saturday Night Live. Okay, 2 minutes to air. The stage manager, 2 minutes to air. So I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is exciting. I'm going to be playing on live TV. There's going to be at least 15 million people watching tonight. And 1 minute to air. Then I'm thinking to myself, wow, what if I miss a note? 15 million people are going to hear me miss the note. 30 seconds. So anyway, so they counted down the show and we played the show, and I didn't really miss any notes, and I had a good time. And so every show after that was a little less anxiety. And now, I only played on 4,500 live TV shows. So in my career, so I don't even think about it now. It's just another gig. I'm thinking about what I'm supposed to play, and I'm thinking about, oh wow, if I have a solo, just turn it loose.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's why I really wanted to ask that question of you, because of the sheer volume of work that you've done, with SNL, and then obviously, with Letterman, that those were super high profile gigs in terms of music. Obviously, from a younger generation, I'm a little younger than you, but I still grew up watching the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
And
Oh man.
Doc's band. Oh my God, is one of the greatest bands on television in history.
Yeah. Well, I played 1971. Lou Marini and I played with Doc Severinsen's weekend band. Doc Severinsen was the leader of the Tonight Show in New York with Johnny Carson, and every Saturday and Sunday, we went to the airport and flew someplace, and we played every Saturday and Sunday. It was a 10-piece band, and he had 8 or 10 girls and boys singer dancers, and he did pop music of the time. And Doc would come out 6 or 7 times during the concert, which was about 2 hours long, and he would play a bravado trumpet solo, and he'd change outfits every time. But Doc Severinsen, oh my God, he never played unless he had warmed up for 2 hours.
Man.
Like we were in Las Vegas at the Sands. First show's at 2:00, right? Or whenever it was. And he'd be there at noon. He'd be there at noon warming up. He wouldn't go. He always, he had this. And what a great player! Oh my God! And his band, his weekend band, it was a great gig. 1971, it was $250 a night. That was a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
And I'd say Lou Marini was in the band. Snooky Young.
Yeah, Snooky.
Lead trumpet. Now he was lead trumpet with Fletcher Henderson in 1939. So, and he was the nicest guy, number one, and he never missed a note. Every weekend for a year, he never missed a note. Yeah.
And man, and he could swing.
Lou Tabakin was in the band. Ed Shaughnessy, John B. Williams, Ross Tompkins. Yeah, it was a good band
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So man, that's just, yeah, that's history. That's music history right there.
And one night, let's see, during the year 1971, when I was in the weekend band, the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson moved to Los Angeles. Okay, so but the weekend band kept going. You just go to the airport, and and then one night we found ourselves, the weekend band, we found ourselves the guest artists, the guest music on the Tonight Show in Los Angeles with Johnny Carson. Now we played Only the Beginnings by Chicago. So now I'm on national TV playing a trombone solo.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I think that was my first 1971. Yeah, but Doc he was such an inspiration.
Yeah.
The way he took care of himself and the way you could see him breathe.
Yeah. Even to this
He's
day.
still. I saw him at the jazz convention. He was 89 years old at the time, and I just went backstage and I just went, Doc, Tom Malone, I just want to say hello. I'll leave you alone. Get back here. He said, and we hung out for about a half hour before he had to go on stage and talk. And he had all his marbles. He remembered everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just he was a great role model for me in many ways.
Yeah.
The way he got along with people, and he was just a straight shooter.
Yeah. Yeah. And still has a sound, man. He still blows like nobody else can.
Later in my career, I did an arrangement for Lonette McKee for the Tonight Show in Los Angeles, and I flew out there as an arranger and headed out the charts to the guys in the band, and also twice with Paul Schaefer when he was a guest on the show. I wrote charts for the Tonight Show band, and that was a great thrill for me.
Yeah. Well, and that actually brings me kind of to the second part of the question that I wanted to ask you is that, having been on SNL, being working with the Letterman band and Paul, the Saturday Night Live gig that also kind of helped spawn the Blues Brothers thing. You've been part of some rather iconic productions in terms of music in the past few decades. You can't help but think, when you're thinking about live TV in the past few decades, you can't help but think about the Saturday Night Live band and the Letterman band. Those are just two fantastic bands that people got to see regularly. Saturday Night Live, obviously only once a week, but the Letterman band multiple times a week. And then the Blues Brothers. I mean, that movie. There's a new generation. Like every generation, gets introduced to that movie because it is still not only a comedy classic, but it is a musical classic. The stuff that you guys did as the Blues Brothers, and then obviously the stuff with, Aretha and, all the people that are in it, it's just so phenomenal. Do you ever stop and think like, oh my God, I've been part of these kind of genre defining moments? Does it ever kind of like dawn on you the impact that you've been able to have on the culture of the world, basically, or is it just like, it's another gig?
Well, I was always a big fan of James Brown, big fan of Aretha Franklin, big fan of Ray Charles. I got to work with Ray Charles on Saturday Night Live. I got to write some arrangements for him. We're rehearsing the band, and Ray Charles is sitting there, and we're rehearsing and he cuts off the band. He says, tenor sax bar 37, that should be a B flat instead of a B natural. Now how can you explain that? James Brown, oh my God. I not only played with him on TV, on the Letterman show on Saturday Night Live, but I also played on Funky President. I played on Give Me My Thing. And I played live with him in New York. We played a week at the Copacabana, two shows a night, 6 nights. The next week we played at a club called the Cheetah, which was a big Latin R&B club, West 52nd Street. 5 nights, 2 shows a night. The second show started at 2:30 in the morning.
Oh man!
Started at 2:30.
Started at 2:30.
Yeah, but James, oh my God. And I got, watching him rehearse the band, he would show the drummer exactly what to play. Do this on the snare, do this on the hi-hat. And I was a big fan of his. I go all the way back to he did 2 albums, instrumental albums where he played organ.
Mm-hmm.
We're going way back. This is actually probably before Live at the Apollo.
Right.
So I know all his music, and getting to play and even arrange for him. I actually got Fred Wesley called me up one time from Los Angeles. He says, Tom, I miss my playing. Can you do a recording session? Can you sub for me at a recording session up in White Plains, blah, blah, blah studio, And so I actually played on a JB's album.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But I mean, James Brown was always such an energy, and it was a guy that sort of came from nothing, and he made something happen, and he developed his own style, and everybody follows that style. Even, you listen to rap music today, you'll hear, James Brown influence in there. Yeah. I just think he's a musical genius of sorts. And Aretha Franklin too. She used to request me for her solo records in New York when she would come through and record. So good relationship with her too.
Yeah, man, that's such great stuff. And
it's very rewarding for me creatively to get to play with my heroes.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm actually getting somewhere.
Well, it's funny, the way that fame works, and there are different levels of fame, and there are people who are famous, like let's say the trumpet world, and that's actually part of what kind of spawned this podcast, or that has led me to be able to do this podcast, is because a lot of people are afraid to go up to the famous players, the Waynes, the Jerry Hayes, the Frank Greens, the Hughes of the world, and say, hey, look, man, I just really want to talk to you. They're afraid because it's like, oh, this guy's really famous. But, the fame of, Jerry, very, very, one of the most influential, in my mind, one of the most influential musicians of the past 30, 40 years, I guess now. Since
Jerry.
Since the 70s,
and arranger too.
The stuff that he has done, has really defined a total genre. But if he were to walk down the street here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where I am, and go to the Starbucks, no one would know who he was.
True. That's true.
Now, LeBron James, that's a different story. Tom Cruise, that's a different story. So there are all these different levels of fame.
True.
And
true.
But ultimately what we find out is that, everybody, you're still a person, you're still a human. And that when you treat people like humans, as opposed to idols or people to be revered, as opposed to respected, you treat someone with respect. That's one thing. When you revere someone, when you put them on a pedestal, then I think that can become very uncomfortable at times. But I think that ability to be in a position where you hold some level of gravitas, that you use, as we were talking about earlier, about using your powers for good. That you use your fame, you use your level of influence in an industry or in a society. You use it for growth. You use it for the betterment of all. So I know that with the stuff that you've been doing, that you've been fortunate to do, and the people you've been fortunate to work with, you've witnessed the dark side of fame. You've witnessed you've seen the allure, you've seen the positive, but you've also seen the traps that people fall into. So, were there any moments where you kind of had the question of, is this really the path that I want to be on, or any points where you're like, you had those moments of clarity where it's like, I have to be very careful not to walk down that path because I don't want to end up like this person or that person who's allowed their fame to destroy their life?
Oh yeah. Well, the thing that comes to my mind, to the people I've known in my life, inspired musicians, the path you don't want to go down is the drug path. That's a dead end, and I mean, dead. I mean, dead like like your heart stops beating.
Right.
I have to make a list of my friends that are no longer with us because of the drugs. So that's a path you don't want to go down. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. I mean, it's so, I think it's so easy because, regardless of where you are on that spectrum, whether you're famous in just a niche kind of audience. I mean, like when I was very heavily involved in the martial arts world and competition world and things like that, especially as I became like a judge and a coach and things like that. I go to these conventions, doing presentations, and people were wanting, okay, can I take you out to lunch? Can I do this? Can I do that? And sometimes it was the person who just really wanted to show appreciation for your contribution to something that they loved. Other times it was people that were wanting to either cozy up to you to get a better score the next time they competed, or they're wanting to get something from you.
Yeah.
And so, I've experienced on that level. And then there's all the way up to, the mega stars, the athletes, the actors, the politicians, or people like that people, you end up having to put up a shield sometimes because there are too many people that want to take and not have a reciprocal relationship with you. And that's why I try to be very respectful from everyone, and to learn from everyone, and to share, and to give, try to always give more than I take. Because I understand what that's like. But in your world, in the world that you're traveling in, on a daily basis, how do you manage to walk the fine line between being so open that you give away everything that you have and that you're left drained, and giving yourself boundaries to work with, that don't make you aloof, but also don't put you in a position where you've just overextended yourself?
Well, I'm always working at doing something in my studio. I'm either doing remote production for somebody. I just arranged and recorded the whole horn section for a Temptations song, and another new artist like last week. And I have to protect myself, because my time is valuable, and don't have time to waste. So have to, you don't plaster your phone number and your email address all over outside of your house or anywhere. You have to protect your privacy a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's probably one of the hardest things that we have to deal with now in the digital age. Back in the old days when you didn't have things like cell phones, you were lucky if you had an answering service. It's a little easier to give your information out, but right now it's so easy for people to find out things about you that maybe you didn't even want them to know, because everything is out there. So, but it's wonderful. It's that wonderful little dichotomy that exists where the information is so readily available to us, but sometimes there's too much information or too much of the wrong thing out there. So being very careful about what we share with others is that's
Absolutely
important.
I agree. We have to protect ourselves to a certain degree. And when I go out to do a guest artist at a college, lecture, a concert, stuff like that, you get to talk to people and get to meet people, but you don't necessarily give them your cell phone number, and you don't necessarily give them your email address, and you have to take one step backwards sometimes, because I get too much email as it is, and not that it's bad email, but I spend, I have to spend time erasing emails before the thing shuts down.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Well,
it's crazy.
You're in demand. You're definitely in demand. Yeah.
Like,
I've got two final segments we got to get to, and then I'm gonna value you and your time and honor and respect that to let you get out of here. But the one thing that I did want to ask before we got into these is, I know it's kind of like asking a parent which one is their favorite child, but if you had to give me your favorite gigs that you've done,
I've been asked this question before, and there's been so many outstanding moments. I mentioned a couple of them. Playing with James Brown at the Cheetah was one of them. Playing the closing ceremonies in Atlanta was one of them. Wow. Playing at Sting's Rainforest. Oh my God. Yeah. There's so many people there, big name people that I could drop.
Well, let me rephrase this question, because if you've been asking me before, I don't want to ask the question. I want to ask a different question, but it's going to be the same kind of thing. I want to know what your favorite gig was that you went into going, I really don't want to do this one. Like one of those moments where it's like, I'm going to do this anyway, and it turns out being something that you just thoroughly enjoyed more than anything that you could imagine.
I never went into a gig with that attitude. Like I don't really this is going to suck. I never really went into a gig like that.
Okay.
With that attitude. Mine was like, I'm going to play as good as I can, and I'm going to have as much fun as I can, and I'm going to, I'm going to groove with the band, and because I like just about, I like just about every style of music. I played with Garth Brooks, played with all the big country guys, and all the big Latin guys, all the big jazz. I played on Miles Davis's last recording about 3 weeks before he died. Miles Davis and Quincy Jones in Montreux.
Right.
That was a big thing for me. And so many. But no, I never did a gig that I didn't want to do.
Well, that is a great answer in and of itself. So
I was thankful to have the gig.
Well, there is that too. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up. I have two segments that we do every episode, and the first one is for all the gearheads out there, because you know how we brass players are. We're definitely gearheads. So this segment is called Geared Up, and I just want to just get a brief rundown. You have to go into details into all of the specifics of your gear, but just what kind of stuff are you using, and more specifically, what is it that you look for when you're looking at your gear? What are you trying to get out of your instrument?
I have to have the best trumpet there is in order to sound good. It's right across the hall. This is early New York Bach.
Oh man!
No, it's serial number 4418. It says 7-59 on the bell. That means it's a 7 bell. No, it's a 7 lead pipe and a 459 bore. That means medium large. It's made in 1936, and
that's a beauty.
This is a Bach 3C mouthpiece, and I'm trying to remember what you call this. John Faddis walked into a session with one of these one day. Compression ring, it's called. And the theory is that it's very thin right here at this part of the mouthpiece, so it thickens it up and it centers the sound. Makes it a little more difficult to play, strangely enough, but I like the sound. I have the early New York Bach trumpets say New York, USA on the bell.
Mm-hmm.
That was the factory on 2nd Avenue. When the factory moved to the Bronx, it says New York 67 on the bell. Now, this is the early New York. I had 9 early New York trumpets, and I gave one to Frank Green, my friend Frank Green. But this is my favorite. I have some that are older and have more elaborate engraving on them, but this is the one that I really like.
Oh, that's a beauty.
And the 3C mouthpiece works for me. It gets a good sound, and I have an emergency high note mouthpiece, but I don't like to pull it out. It's easier to hit the high note, but the sound quality loses a little bit of something. So I try to just stay with this mouthpiece.
Mm-hmm.
One time on the Letterman show, when it was just 2 horns in the section, Arturo Sandoval sat in with us, and so I'm hitting the high F at the end of the song, and he's an octave higher. And he's playing a 3C mouthpiece.
Playing on that 3C.
I asked him, I said, why do you play the 3C? He says, because if I lose it, I can walk into any music store and buy another one.
That's legit. That's a great reason.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh man.
that's absolutely it. That's those old New York box, man. Those are beautiful instruments.
I have also have a pre-war silver-plated French Besson flugelhorn, which actually plays in tune, as opposed to most other. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Most other flugelhorns, and I have a Selmer 4-valve piccolo trumpet.
Okay. Great. So with your gear that you're using, particularly because your demands that you have definitely lean for the sound that you need to get. Do you find that having that kind of a standard setup? I know Arturo says you can walk into any music store and get a 3C, but do you find that setup allows you the versatility that you need for things without having to do too many equipment changes on a gig? You're not the Lou Soloff 50 mouthpieces on the stand kind of guy.
Lou Soloff had he used to take, when we were Blood, Sweat, and Tears, he had 3 trumpets. He had two Bachs, and one of them was like this, New York Bach, and then he had a Schilke that had 2 bells. So he had 3 horns, and one of the horns had a straight bell, and then it had a dizzy bell on it. So he'd bring 3 trumpets, and he had 5 mouthpieces. He had a 3C, a 7C. I had two custom mouthpieces that were made by a guy at Schilke. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Famous mouthpiece maker. It was called Soloff 1 and Soloff 2. And Soloff 1 was a shallower mouthpiece, and Soloff 2 was even shallower than that. I'm trying to remember what the 5th mouthpiece was. I'm thinking it had to be a Bach. It was probably a larger Bach, like a 1.5C. And so Lou let me make copies. I went to Jordanelli's and made copies of the Soloff 1 and the Soloff 2. One day, Lou lost his mouthpiece pouch. So I gave him those 2 mouthpiece copies back. Yeah.
That's great. That's a great story.
I miss Lou too. He was a good friend.
Yeah, yeah, and such a phenomenal player.
He studied with all the best guys too. He studied with everybody, symphonic players. One time after I joined the band, it was 1973. Occasionally we would go to this restaurant on Thompson Street in Greenwich Village that had great Italian food. And so he calls me and says, can you come to dinner at 7:00 tomorrow night? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I'm envisioning that the 2 of us will be sitting there and we'll be talking about music and talking about trumpets and stuff like that. The entire brass section from the Chicago Symphony was there. Yeah.
Yeah.
1973. I was just blown away. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. In terms of switching back and forth between trombone and trumpet, do you find that, obviously it's not a problem for you since you do it so regularly, but if someone is interested in, say, starting to do doubling, if you're a trumpet player and you're thinking about switching over and doing a little trombone work, what do you suggest in terms of equipment that would provide the easiest transition from one instrument to the next?
Well, I started on the tuba and then went to the trombone and then went to the trumpet and then went to the piccolo trumpet and then went to the bass trombone. So one piece of advice would be, if you're going to be like pieces and stick with them, like if you're going to, especially diameter, like, I told you I have a shallower trumpet mouthpiece, but the rim is the same. So, because you build up muscle around the placement of the mouthpiece. So, you need to, Maynard Ferguson had a concentric circle theory about mouthpieces because he played all the brass instruments. And so you want to have a centered embouchure, like where your tuba goes, and then you have a smaller one for the bass trombone and a smaller one for the trombone, and then but they're all centered, and they're all, one is within the other. It looks like a target. It looks like a target. You're going to shoot bow and arrow at a target, or shoot a gun at a target. That's what the rings look like. And because the more you play the instrument, that you develop the ring, the muscles can form around the placement of the mouthpiece. Mm-hmm. So you have to be careful. And like if you play too loud and too high on the trumpet, you could mess yourself up, and then you're messed up on everything. So I think the trumpet and the piccolo trumpet are the ones that you really have to be careful. I don't think you're going to hurt yourself playing the trombone or the bass trombone or the tuba. If I have a day to practice, I'll start on the tuba and then go to the bass trombone and then go to the trombone and then go to the trumpet and then go to the piccolo trumpet. And if I have a limited amount of time to practice, I'll do lip service on the trumpet. These muscles right here in the corner of your mouth are the ones that give you range and endurance. That allows you to play for the extra hour. It allows you to hit the high note. The way we develop these is by isolating them and playing lip slurs. You can play complicated lip slurs, or you can just I'll just play C to high C just over and over and over and over and over and over until I can't do it anymore. And then I'll put the horn down, check my email, come back a minute later, and do some more of the same kind of lip slurs. Or F to high F too. That's a good lip slur too. But that basically isolates these muscles, and since these muscles play all the instruments, playing lip slurs for 10 minutes on the trumpet is the same as playing lip slurs on the trombone for 20 minutes. It's the same as playing lip slurs on the tuba for 40 minutes because of the compression, the required compression. And the piccolo trumpet is even more compression. So, playing lip slurs on the trumpet for 10 minutes, that's, but you got to make yourself tired. It's the same principle as a weightlifter. Mm-hmm. Weightlifter doesn't just go and pick up 250 pounds. No, weightlifter takes 15, 20 pound hand weights and does repetitions and repetitions and repetitions and repetitions and then puts them down and rests for a minute. Let the blood circulate into the muscles, and then picks them up and does it again and does it again. And so those are the lip slurs for a weightlifter. But it's all about muscle development, making your muscles stronger. You know this from your martial arts,
right? Yeah.
You do push-ups, or you do whatever the.
Yeah, all kinds of crazy stuff. So yeah,
exactly.
That's really great. I've never heard anyone explain it quite that way in terms of doing the kind of correlation through the from the lowest of the lows to the highest of the highs. That makes absolute sense, because you're concentrating the vibrating surface area, which is that's gonna require a little bit more compression to hold things in and stuff. So that makes absolute sense. So wow.
I worked with a karate teacher who instead of just doing standard push-ups, you would go halfway up and just hold there, and you're doing them on your knuckles as opposed to your flat hands. And you go halfway up and just stay there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Well, cool. That was definitely worth the price of admission. Okay, well, we got one last segment to get through, and this is brought to us by our friends at Robinson's Remedies, which I know Kenny and Richard very well. That's the Robinson's Remedies.
Oh yeah.
Our good friends at Robinson's Remedies. This is the Robinson's Remedies rapid fire round.
You ever heard him play the piccolo trumpet?
I have heard Kenny play the piccolo trumpet many a time. Usually directly at my face. We've been at many a show together.
He plays the same horn I play. He plays the Selmer 4-valve.
Yeah.
I just saw him at the jazz convention a year and a half ago or something.
Yeah, Kenny's a good guy, really good guy. So Robinson's Remedies.
I endorsed that product, by the way.
I heard that through the grapevine. Yes, I did. So and I also am an endorsing artist for them, and they sponsor this segment on the show. So it's all family. But,
absolutely. Good stuff.
This
good
is
stuff.
It's you talk about lip slurs, or the weight training for the trumpet player, or and that's the creatine. That's the stuff that helps help you the recovery. So
absolutely,
it
works.
So we're gonna do this rapid fire round. It's a series of questions. They're gonna be kind of all over the place. I just need your quickest answer, your fastest response to
Okay.
these questions, and we're gonna get started right now with the first one. Tom Bones Malone, who's the biggest influence on your life that is not a musician?
Biggest influence is not a musician.
Yeah.
Oh, Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff was a Sufist from Syria who decided at a young age that he was not, he did not accept the definition of reality that he was learned in education and in school. So he searched the world to find the truth. And he went to the deserts of Africa. He went to the Himalaya mountains. He would walk for days, to go up to to find, an old religious man who had the answer to the questions that he was looking for. And he talks about, the powers of the mind and alternate reality. And that huge influence on me. Georges Gurdjieff. Trying to remember the name of his book, In Search of Reality. In Search of Reality.
Okay. Sounds like it's going to be a good read for me. Speaking of, here's the next question. What is your favorite book?
That book is my favorite book.
All right. Let's see.
That's the name of it? In Search of the Miraculous by P.D. Ouspensky. In Search of the Miraculous.
In Search of the Miraculous. Okay.
Yeah, it deals with metaphysics.
That's right up my alley. Okay, here's the next one. What's the worst movie you've ever seen?
Ooh, it was not the Blues Brothers.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say definitely not the Blues Brothers.
Not the Blues Brothers. Oh, wow. Well, I never lasted through a movie that I didn't like. So, I just turned it off.
Okay.
And tried to forget about it. So I guess I wish I had a better answer.
Maybe I should rephrase it. What's the movie you spent the least amount of time watching? That would have been the one.
Yeah. Many of them, the violent movies, I usually check out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I'd rather have something sort of funny and mindless and or very dramatic and heartfelt and
uplifting and
romantic is okay. Pretty girls, that's okay.
Yeah. All right. If you weren't a musician, what would you want to be?
I would be a psychotherapist.
Okay. Sometimes I think being in a
I only got the bachelor's degree in psychology. So.
Yeah. Being the leader of a horn section is sometimes like being a psychologist. So.
Well, degree in psychology has helped me dealing with musicians.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not necessarily guys like yourself, who are intelligent and well read, but some other more complicated musicians.
Well, I will accept that as a compliment, my friend.
I meant it as a compliment.
All right. What's your favorite drink?
Ooh, I like vodka with a splash of dark rum and coconut water.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That sounds lovely.
It's a happy time during the pandemic, happy hour.
There you go. You could have a dinner party, and at this dinner party, you can invite any three living people. Don't need to know them, just invite them. Who would you want to have at your party?
Oh, Jerry Hay, Wayne Bergeron, and Frank Green.
Oh man, you'd have to have a fourth person. You have to invite me for that one. So
okay.
Those are three great people right there, and of course you have Jerry bring the wine. Of course, I understand you're quite the wine connoisseur as well. So
I only have about 700 bottles downstairs.
That's it.
Jerry Hay is he's the wine connoisseur. Yeah. Oh my God, he posts stuff on Facebook. It just blows me.
Yeah. 700 bottles. It has been a hard pandemic for you. I can see already.
Well, you don't want to run out.
Exactly. Some people are stockpiling guns, wine.
I have, like I said, I have 7 more trumpets down there. I have 24 New York Bach trombones and flutes, piccolos, saxophones, tubas, bass trombones.
You're good to go.
Piles, yeah. Don't want to run out.
All right. So, same thing. You're having this dinner party. You've got those three wonderful people with you. You got three extra chairs, and you're going to fill those chairs with any three people from history.
Wow. Wow. Oh man. Well, I guess Plato, right?
Okay.
And wow. Well, Freddie Hubbard. And Herbie Green.
Okay, man, that would be a fun one. I'm sure that Plato would sit in on something. All right, lacquer plated or raw?
I'm sorry.
Lacquer plated or raw?
Lacquer plated or raw? Well, Bill Reichenbach told me years ago, and he's right, that the instrument sounds the best with no lacquer at all. But then when it starts getting rusty, then it becomes a problem. So I take the lacquer because it's practical. You can just wipe it off and it stays there. Bill Watrous passed away. He was a good friend of mine, and I called up his wife. She needed money, so I bought his trombone.
Mm.
It was exactly the same as my horn, exactly the same everything, except his was gold plated.
Mm-hmm.
And I played it for a few months, and one day my wife said, I was playing, and she says, "Play your other horn." I went back to my other regular horn, and she says, "You sound better on your own horn." And I realized that the gold plating made the horn darker, and that my real sound is more on the bright sound. I'm more of an R&B rock trombone player, and so I was working too hard to try to get that sound out of Bill's horn.
Mm-hmm.
Bill's sound was a different sound. So
right.
I ended up selling that to a good friend of mine. I think it's kind of a secret that he has it, but for the same price I paid for it, because he's a good friend of mine. But the horn is still being played, and the guy's putting out a new album like next week. So it's in a good place.
It's good. Yeah. There's still music coming out of it. So
absolutely.
That's what we want. All right. What's your greatest fear?
Wow. Well, if I walked into a session and couldn't play the part.
Okay. You could be granted a superpower. You're going to be granted one superpower. What would it be?
Oh, wow. X-ray vision.
You can get yourself in a lot of trouble with that, my friend.
Well, see some stuff that you wouldn't see.
Yeah, that's true. See some stuff you don't want to see.
That too.
What aspect of trumpet playing do you feel is the most overrated?
Wow. High notes.
Okay. And what aspect do you feel is the most underrated?
Well, actually, getting a good sound, I think, is underrated a lot. I can't, but like Wayne, Jerry, Frank. I mean, these guys get a good sound. Yeah. But outside of the upper echelon, I think people sacrifice sound quality to do other things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just mentioned high notes. People will sacrifice sound to be able to hit the high notes. I know a friend of mine who will remain nameless, who has a bit of a name, like plays a tiny, like a 15, it's like a 15E kind of mouthpiece, custom made, but very, very small circle, very shallow. And I like, why do you play that mouthpiece? He says, because I don't have to practice. And he still hit the high notes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. To go back, Frank Zappa wrote a song called "The Black Page," and it was about that fear of walking into a session and you couldn't play the part.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's I'm a huge Frank Zappa fan, and
I was on the road with him in 1972. I did 3 tours with him.
Yeah, and you were in the Live at New York.
It was that was later. That was much later. 1978, I think, with the Brecker Brothers, Lou Marini, Ronnie Cuber.
Yeah.
And we played the Black Page. I played the piccolo part on the Black Page on that concert.
Okay. Yeah.
But and I turned down. I took the gig. I was playing with Frank, and he cut the band down, and I auditioned to play electric bass. And because he said next tour is just going to be a 6-piece band, and Bruce Fowler is going to be the only horn player. He says, you want to audition to play bass? And yeah, okay. So I auditioned, and I didn't hear from Frank for about 3 weeks. Got a call from Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Can you be here tomorrow? Chuck Winfield's leaving the band, So I left town, and Frank called. The day I left, Frank called to say I had the job playing electric bass with Jean-Luc Ponty and George Duke.
Oh, my gosh.
4 tours of Europe and a tour of Japan for double the money that Blood, Sweat, and Tears was going to pay me. But I never looked back. I recommended Tom Fowler, who was Bruce Fowler's brother.
Right.
Great bass player.
Yeah.
Sounded great with Frank. Frank loved him. Played with him for many years. I never looked back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that you were on the path that you needed to be on. So that's all we can say. All right. All right. Well, this actually ties in good with this question. You're granted the ability to go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice about music. What would it be?
If I could go back in time to find out.
Just you're going to give your today, Tom Bones Malone today goes back and give little Tommy some advice about music. After all your years of experience, what would be the advice you'd give your younger self?
Oh, practice. I was raised on a farm in South Mississippi from age 11, and I wanted to get out of there. So I practiced 4 or 5 hours a day because I somehow knew that my airplane ticket out of Mississippi was going to be music. And so I practiced all the time.
Okay. And while you're back there, you're going to give your younger self one piece of advice about life.
Oh, same one as before. Be nice to everybody.
Be nice to everybody. That's good.
My mother told me that.
I think that's the best advice anyone could ever give. And so here's our final question. Tom, what do you want your legacy to be?
He was a nice guy.
There you go. It's just that simple. It is just that simple. Well, Tom, thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast. I really, really appreciated your time. And, one thing that we did not talk about was your recovery from cancer. And that's something that, I've had conversations with Wayne and Jerry, being a cancer survivor myself. That's so important. So do you have any parting words that you'd like to give to anyone who's dealing with the specter of cancer in their life right now? Any advice that you could give?
Well, look for the symptoms and don't put it off. Mine was prostate cancer. Get a PSA test. That'll tell you where you had. My dad died of prostate cancer. 3 of his brothers. So it's a family thing. So I was sort of like when I started having symptoms, I immediately moved ahead, and $136,000 later, I'm cured. And David Letterman insurance covered all but $900 of it. It's a new procedure where they microscopically inject radioactive seeds into the tumors within the prostate gland. I mean, we're talking about microscopic stuff.
Yeah.
But they inject this radioactive material that eventually the radioactivity goes away. Half-life is about 85 days. So iodine 127, I think it is. And I'm cured.
Awesome.
And I'm so glad. Wayne and Jerry were all, and yourself, cancer survivors. Don't put it off.
Yeah.
Sooner you act on it, the better. Look for the symptoms.
Yeah, I lucked out on mine. I didn't have the symptoms. My father died of prostate cancer as a result of prostate cancer, some other complications, and my
But the blood
PSA,
test, the PSA test.
my PSA was like 15.
Wow.
Yeah, it was nuts. So caught it just in time, and so if I 100% with you, if you have symptoms or if it's in your family, if you're high risk, just get the test done.
Well, after a certain age, like I said, I'm going to be 74 next month, and you got to have a blood test like every year, I think, when you get to be my age. So you want to catch this stuff before it happens.
Yeah.
If you catch it before you have symptoms, all the better.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're a good example of that.
Yeah. Well,
And you're still here.
yeah, I just had my my checkup yesterday, and you're number 12, free. So I'm
Wow.
I'm
Excellent.
doing good. So
I'm happy for you.
I'm happy for you too, my friend. So, and I'm happy for you joining us today on the Trumpet Gurus Hang, and make sure that you share this episode because there's some great information in it, some tremendous nuggets. Go back, listen to it 5, 6, 7 times, and make sure that whenever someone asks you where you heard it from, give Tom his dues. He's a good man. He's a fountain of knowledge, and one of the most genuinely nice guys that I've had a privilege of meeting in the course of doing this podcast. So, Tom, I look forward to being able to actually sit down with you in person sometime, and maybe having a glass of vodka, dark rum, and coconut water with you, and a cup of coffee with Frank Green, and we'll all get together and just enjoy life together.
Oh, well, I thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure to be on your show.
Oh, absolutely. The pleasure is all mine. So, as always, folks, thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll catch you on another episode. Until then, peace and slide grease. We're out. Thanks for hanging with us today. This podcast is all about creating deeper connections through our mutual love of music and the trumpet life. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast, and also like and share this episode with a friend. We want to see the hang grow for show. Please support our sponsors and consider becoming a personal supporter of this podcast as well. Remember, for less than the price of a bottle of valve oil a month, you can keep this podcast moving smoothly. The Trumpet Gurus Hang is recorded at the Candy Factory, a co-working space and social club located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Jose Johnson is the executive producer. Post-production editing is by Mitch Bowers. Our opening theme song was composed and performed by Lexi Signor, and our closing theme music comes courtesy of The Greatest Funeral Ever. Incidental music is by Ethan Swayze and Jose Johnson. Graphic design by Ann Kirby of the Sweet Corps. The Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast is produced in collaboration with the So Good Lancaster Media Group.